on this episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists.
The students who come in with an attitude of I want to learn and you can teach me, then they progress and do well. It's the student who wants to challenge every deduction that instead of learn from that deduction that seems to take a little longer. We get them there, but I think it's about being teachable.
When you continue in a competitive nature and are always looking beyond what you're doing or comparing what you're doing with what someone else is doing, that's the quickest way I know of to really lose steam and lose hope.
Goal is more than passing boards. Our goal is to develop professionals who are competent and safe for practice. And hopefully we're, just even a step above that and they're on their way to being proficient.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists podcast, episode number 460. This is the first Wednesday episode of the month, and so this is your student roundtable. In this episode, we are joined by Jessica Atkinson, Brenda Armstrong, and Kaylee Hunt, and we talk about actually lots of really cool things. One of the things that we wanted to bring them on for was these educators are at Utah Tech, and if you remember several episodes ago, we had their students on. So I want to give them an opportunity to reply to some of the things that they were hearing from their students about the educational process and things from that episode. But also, they're doing some really cool things in partnering with the community. And I think what they're doing is unique. I think it's excellent. I really hope that if you're an educator, if you're a student, whoever, share this episode with the powers that be so that these types of programs continue on in these communities. It doesn't just help the community itself, it also helps foster a really great educational experience for the students. It helps them to make sure that the educators are engaged and are having fun and stay in the programs where we need them to be, teaching up that next generation. So a really great episode. We're really excited about this one. Next week, we have an episode with Sue Scherer. Sue joined us and recorded an episode about pregnancy. And so we find some really good clinical uses from the information that she gave us. So make sure you join us next week for that. So that's it. Short and sweet. We will talk to you next week. Thank you for joining us and enjoy this episode with Jessica, Brenda, and Kaylee.
A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome in, listeners, to the interview portion of the podcast. Joined today by, first of all, we'll start with you, Jessica. Welcome back to the show.
Nice to be here.
You brought some friends. I would actually like you to introduce your friends since you all work together.
I would love to introduce my friends. I have brought with me my program director at Utah Tech University. Her name is Ms. Brenda Armstrong. And if you can't see her, but she's waving like she is Miss America. She's got the wave down, back and forth. Yes, good. She can have a career in modeling if hygiene didn't work out. And then we have Ms. Kaylee Hunt, and she is a professor with me. I should probably say, people in academia, we get a little bit tricky about our titles. And one day, Kaylee will be a professor, but currently she is an assistant professor of dental hygiene with me here at Utah Tech University.
Well, I don't really care about titles, but welcome to all of you for being here. So if listeners, if you're like, oh, Utah Tech, that sounds kind of familiar. Well, guess what? This is a not a rebuttal episode. This is a
follow-up.
Follow-up. Thank you. Adjunct episode to the episode we just had with the students. And so I was like, you know what? It would be a really good opportunity if like the students had an opportunity to say their say, and then now the educators get a chance to say their say and see how, first of all, did all three of you get a chance to listen to that episode?
I did. It was great. It was great to listen to the students.
Didn't they do a great job?
They did a fabulous job.
Yes.
How could you just not be just so darn proud of like just, and not even just as students, but like just as the individuals that they are?
They are.
So
They're
great.
great. They're great people and great dental hygiene students. So it was fun to listen to them.
I think they bring a lot to our program.
Great.
Yeah.
That's so awesome.
Absolutely.
They have bright futures ahead of them.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about because in the beginning of that episode, we talked about like getting into the program, right? And I would love to hear from your all perspective, the getting in part. How hard is it to get in? Are there kind of like some criterion that you look at? Do you do interviews? Do you not do interviews? Because obviously they made it through that process. But I think that's really good from your perspective to kind of like say, okay, well, this is actually what we're looking at.
So to get into the dental hygiene program here at Utah Tech, it weighs heavily on GPA. And a lot of that has to do with there isn't a lot of research out there that demonstrates success in a dental hygiene program, except for GPA. It can be a predictor of board success and graduation success. So you will find that most programs will weigh GPA, whether it's all of your courses combined together GPA or just your science prerequisites or a combination of both. Along with that, at Utah Tech, we ask our students or candidates to have had at least 25 to 50 hours of observation so that they understand what they're coming to and getting involved in. They have to have some letters of recommendations. And we have them take a test called the HSRT, which is a health science reasoning test. You don't have to have a health science background to take the test, but what it does is measures critical thinking. And we think that's really important to understand as someone's coming into the program because it's so important. So those are the main measures of getting in. And honestly, I take all the names off of those who apply and just look at student numbers so that we want to eliminate any bias. And that's how we create it. It's a scoring system.
I thought it was really interesting that there's an observation portion that's required for application. I think that's really unique, and I think it's really important because it definitely makes hygienists or potential future hygienists aware of what they're getting into. And then also the critical thinking part of it as well. I'm an educator as well, I live, and I just talk so much about critical thinking and wanting my students to be really good critical thinkers. So I think that's having that test is really important as well.
Annie, do you all not have observation hour requirements?
No.
And as going in as a student, you didn't have to have that to get into the program?
No.
Interesting.
No. We weight heavily on GPA as well, but we don't have the observation requirement. And then we also don't have to do that health, that reasoning, that critical thinking test.
But
But we have an interview portion and an essay portion and obviously the GPA and all that. So it's
I like the idea about the critical thinking.
I do too. I really like that because I talk about that so much, the critical thinking part of it. I'm like, I want my students to I want them to think bigger picture and I want them to really understand and think about what they're doing, like truly understand about what they're doing. Anyway.
We had a spatial relations exam. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of that, but it's like you have, and it's 2D, but you have to imagine, okay, if we turn this thing into this shape, into like this flat, and you should see all the flaps of it. Okay, well, letter A is over here. If we fold it up into a cube, now where would it be? If we folded it up, and you have to deduct where that looks like. That was a tough one.
That's interesting.
Said that I wasn't spatially related, so
yikes. Rawr.
Just like you have so many dings on your car.
We need a picture of that. That's going to be like the artwork for the episode. Is all the dings of her car.
Or it could be. I don't know. I'm glad that wasn't a predictor for my success in dental hygiene.
How many dings were on your car?
Yes. Wow, that would have been. I can deal with a very small area of things that are spatially related. If it gets pretty big, sometimes I get I get a little.
That's so funny.
Dingy, if you will.
That's the best term.
What we don't do is a dexterity exam. And we used to do that.
That's interesting too.
Yeah, but what we did is we went and looked at the research. So we really try to be evidence-driven here at Utah Tech.
Great.
And that was one of our decisions was that there really wasn't great research that demonstrated that dexterity. Now, sometimes we're you may have a student who struggles more than others, and you're like, ooh, do we need to bring that back? But they eventually, our experience has been get over that hump. But, we all learn at different times and different levels, and we need to honor that too. So
I wonder if the research isn't there because is dexterity something that can be like learned or something that can be taught? Like you said, like getting over that hump. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
I've seen some really bad hand-eye coordinated people. They never get better at that.
Yeah.
But I mean, in hygiene, I don't know. I feel like we teach instrumentation and like we learn these things. We learn how to hold an instrument. We learn how to adapt the instrument. Like,
I just don't think I've ever had a student come with dexterity challenges that haven't been overcome through time and practice.
Yeah.
I personally, as a student, I would tape my fingers. I would do a few things to help with my grasp.
Yeah.
I really focused on those dexterity principles. And I'd like to say my grasp is pretty good now.
That's awesome.
Of all the things you can brag about yourself, like that's just a weird one.
Modified
Instrument
C
grasp.
So
Yeah.
So let me ask this. Okay, so we get some really highly qualified candidates coming through, who again, obviously from the few that we've met, excel, and it's great. But there's got to be some early predictors, I would imagine, that you all are noticing for first years of levels of success. Of this is a characteristic type, or this is a I guess anything that they have, this is their ugalis of what they can like do and if they're going to be successful or not in the program. What are those things?
It doesn't, for me, I'll let you guys answer. It doesn't have to do with dexterity. It doesn't have to do, even sometimes the critical thinking piece, because you can learn that too. It has to be with being teachable. And the students who come in with, I don't know if humble's the right word, but with an attitude of I want to learn and you can teach me, then they progress and do well. It's the student who wants to challenge every deduction that instead of learn from that deduction that seems to take a little longer. We get them there, but I think it's about being teachable.
I would phrase that as a growth mindset.
Growth.
Somebody
I like
who
that.
comes into the program and is invested in their growth as a professional. Not just I have something to pass this afternoon or I just have to get this criteria done, but instead investing in what kind of a dental hygienist do I want to be? And a lot of things filter into that growth mindset as far as motivation, an optimistic outlook, things that I've found as predictors of those who weather the difficulties of hygiene school better than others.
I would have to say I agree with Brenda and Jessica, but I would also add attitude and tenacity. I think if they have a positive attitude, they can have more of that growth mindset and be more open to feedback and learning, and then the tenacity to stick with it. They failed this skill eval once and then attempted it again, maybe weren't successful, but they continue to learn and grow and have that tenacity to keep going and not just give up and say, well, I guess I'm going to fail out of hygiene school. So, that willingness to keep going.
As a follow-up to that, though, let me ask this. So I also agree that we have to be positive, but hygiene, the hygiene program is not known to be a positive experience. So how do you balance that as educators? Be like, look, you come in with a positive thing and I'm not over here just squashing it all the time.
I'll say from my perspective, I think a lot of people come in expecting this to be, the hardest 2 years of their life or whatever, the most difficult. And I beg to differ and say that having gone through hygiene school, I graduated in 2011, so, 13 years ago, I've done much harder things in my life than endure 2 years of hygiene school. But I also think some of the best memories and some of the best times are created when you're in that program. You become very close knit, especially with our students where we have a cohort of 24 students per class. They become each other's rock and each other's foundation, and they buoy each other up. Especially here at Utah Tech, we see a lot of buoying up of each other and stuff. We're lucky in that we don't have a lot of cattiness, I guess, between our students, if you want to call it that. But they really is a lot of support from each other and the faculty in and of itself. So I think that helps raise the atmosphere and the environment as a whole and make it more positive.
Kind of along those lines, we talked in the episode, you might have heard a lot about confidence, and I'm assuming that's a similar answer, but is there anything that you all as a group of educators consciously do to make sure that your students are as confident as possible?
I sat down before this podcast and I wanted to make a list because I'm a list maker.
Sure.
I gotta have my bullet points, and I made a list. One is, what does the program do to support the students? What does the faculty do to support the students? And then what does the community do here in St. George to support our students? And it's a really good list. And I think from a department chair perspective or program director, I think that's one of our strengths, is being able to find those ways to support. Let me give you an example, just a simple one. This fall, we decided to increase our orientation of the new students and the returning seniors. We're a bachelor's degree program. They enter our program as juniors, having completed all their general education. And we decided to have a 2-day orientation. Well, we began the orientation by getting excited, talking about what's going to happen this year. And then we also invited a professional psychologist from the community, came for free, and spent time with our students talking about stress management and a little bit of time management and giving them the tools. And I thought that was just a great example, as someone from the community said, yeah, I'll come, I'll talk, let me help students. And I still hear students today, here we are 10 weeks into the semester, 9 or 10 weeks, I'm not sure where we're at, close. And I have heard students still refer back to that. And I think, I think it's those different levels of support that we have that is really helping the students. And at least that's my hope as department chair.
That's wonderful.
Every semester we have a mentor lunch where, for example, I have we call them color groups because that's how we group them. And I have 6 seniors and 6 juniors in my color group, and we meet for a lunch and they sit down and we have questions that have been procured of what we were hearing that was going around at that time that we discuss as a group. And the junior students get advice from the senior students and oftentimes vice versa. And that's something that I've really enjoyed. And I think that's really helpful for the students to have that touching point, that I will have a time that I can talk with people who have done this before and have a break in the day in and day out of hygiene school.
Does each faculty have like a group of students?
Each full-time faculty. And what we do is we meet at a park.
Oh, outside. I love it.
And the program provides lunch. So we all go to the park, and our administrative assistant has all the lunches laid out for us. We find a picnic table with our group and we visit. But it extends beyond that. If a student, we have a policy that if you fail a skill eval twice, at that point, you need some remediation before you attempt it again. That student immediately knows where to go. They go to the faculty mentor. So even though I'm department chair and I'm not, I don't have any clinical assignments right now, I'm still involved with that. And a student can come to my office, or I can meet them in the clinic, and we can work on that skill together to get that one-on-one experience. And so it extends beyond that luncheon, right? That the student now knows that they have a faculty that there's to support them.
It sounds like you all have like this discussion about how you want to proceed as a group, but where do some of these ideas come from? Because this seems unique.
It does.
From my experience, but maybe it's the norm for you all.
It's group effort.
Who wants to bring a psychologist in? Like that's a bonkers idea. But you look at sports teams and they do that exact same thing.
They have team psychologists.
You need to be mentally strong, and like,
mental
that's
health.
so smart.
Mental health.
I think it was a group discussion, like what more can we do to handle this generation of students that, we're seeing a higher level of anxiety, right, than we did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And is that generational? Is it cultural? Is it COVID after effects? We're not sure. But here we are trying to find solutions to support our students so they can be successful. And then Jessica had great connections. So, it's a great group effort that we, as a full-time faculty, there's 6 of us. We get along well. We see each other as a team. We spend more time with each other than we do anyone else in the world. And so we work hard at our relationships so that it then trickles down to our students.
I think that inclusivity is so important because I know the students had mentioned this as far as like the intensity of trying to like have the good grades and everything to get into the program. And then once they got into the program, like I think one of the students had mentioned just like feeling like they needed to let their guard down a little bit because we're just like so hyper aware of wanting to get in the program and being competitive. And they're like, once we're in, we don't need to be so competitive and we do need to uplift each other. And I think as students, like having that inclusivity from all of you, I think is so important. And it, like you had mentioned, Brenda, having somewhere to go and knowing exactly who to go to for that support, I think just would make the world of difference in instilling confidence in our students.
Because continuing that competitiveness instead of shifting to competence would destroy them. When you continue in a competitive nature and are always looking beyond what you're doing or comparing what you're doing with what someone else is doing, that's the quickest way I know of to really lose steam and lose hope.
And we're seeing that in like the professional setting, in the private practices and the DSOs now, that sometimes if they don't lose that mentality of competitiveness, now they're doing the same thing in the programs. I need to be better than this other hygienist, or I need to, carry my own weight. And, it's like a head-to-head match sometimes when it doesn't have to be. We're all in this together. I want to point out before I lose train of thought, as I always do, that the feeling that I got from the students was, and I don't know how you all are doing this because it's very hard to do, there's a familiarity with the instructors. They like you. They can call you by their first name, but yet there's also a level of healthy fear and respect where they also call you by your last name sometimes when they're talking to you in a different format. And I think that's really, I don't know if you guys have bottled that and replicate that and send it out to all the educators, but however you're doing that, just keep on doing it. I do want to move into, 20 minutes goes by too fast.
It goes so fast.
Okay. So this is going to be the last question, and it might be a little bit longer of answers, but who knows? Okay. So here's the thing. I feel like and you guys mentioned earlier, the problems, anxiety and stuff of yesteryear are different than what they are now, right? What are you feeling? So you do everything you can to prepare these students for the real world. You can't prepare them for everything. There is a blind spot somewhere that when they hit, the office day one, they're like, dang it, we didn't learn about what? What is the thing that they feel like, and through no fault of your own, right? It's not part of the curriculum, but what do you feel like that they are missing? Insurance codes? I mean, I don't know.
They're really good at insurance codes. What's the hardest thing for our students is to go and practice in a profession that hasn't met the standard of, how do I say this, guys?
I understand what you're saying. I absolutely understand.
So, for example, the concerns I get many times, and from adjunct faculty that are working in private practice often, and they're going in private practice and they see bleeding fours on slight bone loss, little bit of fuzzing of the lamina dura, and that's a stage one. That's stage one perio. But in private practice, to bill a 4341 or a 4342 on a 4mm pocket with slight bone loss, that's going to get kicked back in your face from the insurance company. And I think that's been the most difficult thing for our students, is that they come from an environment that we hold them to the highest level of AAP classifications. You look at what you're assessing, you gather your assessment information, and you plug that in to this rubric, this AAP classification rubric, which spits out your assessment classifications, and then you treat according to those classifications. Yeah. And then they go out into practice, and they're trying to do that, and they just get eaten alive.
I once heard, and I was like shocked that someone said this, that the biggest barrier to care is state practice acts and state dental boards. And And oh, I heard it. Okay. I'm not saying that. I'm going to have some people mad at me. But I think it comes down to that professional autonomy. So dental hygienists are trained at a really great level. And then when they get into practice, their practice act may not reflect their educational ability and capability, right? And so there's some frustrations there is what I found. And I had a faculty share with me yesterday that she had been with a patient, and this patient was a perio maintenance that had some bleeding pockets. So with this student, she did a ultrasonic right and left insert guided experience skill eval. Then they also did some subgingival air powder polish, and it was followed up with laser. Now, think about that experience that student had with that patient. And I hope that patient returns in 3 months and we can see the results of that because it was perio maintenance. But tell me how often they're going to get that experience in private practice. But wasn't that cool? I mean, when
So
this
comprehensive.
faculty was,
Yep.
when the faculty was telling me about it, I'm like, oh, wow, that is so cool. And I'm so happy we could provide that opportunity for the student to see what can happen, right? I'd like to ask Kaylee to talk about how she works on scaffolding for our students to be prepared for expanded functions. Utah doesn't allow it, but all the states that surround us do. And so Kaylee has this experience of helping the students understand the why to get them to the end. So Kaylee, talk about what you do.
Thanks, Brenda. This is my third year teaching full-time, and the courses that I teach are very scaffolded, building upon each other. And I just had this discussion with my students yesterday because they were asking why I have them sculpt and carve teeth in their tooth anatomy, tooth morphology class. And I see Andrew with a big grin on his face, like, yeah, I remember doing that in school too. But I have them do that because it helps solidify that anatomy and that morphology of the tooth for one, when they're practicing scaling, exploring, etc. But also because I teach them tooth morphology first semester, their junior year. Their second semester, junior year, we teach dental materials. So then we're practicing the different materials, and I have them do a couple activities, placing, messing with different materials on teeth and things like that. And then for their senior year, I have them place restorations on Typodont teeth. So they place and carve both amalgam and composite restorations. And so I have them carve a tooth out of wax, as I'm sure a lot of people that are probably listening have done in their hygiene education. But this year I've also implemented having them sculpt a tooth out of clay to help mimic the carving of amalgam and the sculpting of composite placement, and really work on and fine-tune that anatomy, getting all those transverse and, triangular ridges and those oblique ridges, and helping really just solidify that anatomy so that they can be better prepared when they enter the workforce to look for suspicious areas or look for leaky margins on restorations, or, help do that pre-exam for the dentist before he even gets in there and really hone in and know what they're looking at. And so that's really scaffolded to the student's benefit, learning that anatomy to begin with and learning the materials and then putting it all together for their senior year. So
that let me ask you this. Maybe this is more of a for Brenda question. So what she's doing, though, really isn't going to help them with their boards. It really isn't going to help them with passing school at this point. Is that what I'm hearing? You're preparing them for success in life, but not really.
Yeah.
So we do offer a restorative board here, even though it's not offered, isn't possible. And our students are passing, and our students have, not all, but we usually have one or two that go to a different state. They didn't plan to stay here to begin with, and are able to practice that restorative. But what we're hearing from the dentists in our community is that they're actually better hygienists because they have this background.
Yeah.
And, our goal is more than passing boards. Our goal is to develop professionals who are competent and safe for practice. And hopefully we're, just even a step above that, and they're on their way to being proficient.
I will tell you what, from the 3 that we heard from,
Yes.
you're doing exactly that.
Incredible.
So, look, I wish we had more time with you all. Hopefully you'll come back on the show at some point.
It's so inspiring listening
Thank
to you all.
very much for being here.
Thank you so much.
If the listeners have any questions, who should I have them send questions to?
Any of us. You can find me at jessica.atkinson@utah.tech.edu.
Brenda Armstrong is brenda.armstrong@utah.tech.edu.
And Kaylee Hunt, it's KALI.hunt@utah.tech.edu.
Thank you again so much for being on. This is awesome.
Thank you for having us. It's been
Yes,
fun.
thank you.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of 2 hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of 2 hygienists.